You see the message. It's not complicated. It doesn't need a long answer. There's nothing urgent, nothing dramatic. And still, you don't reply. You close the app. You tell yourself you'll answer in a minute. You even want to answer. And somehow, that minute turns into hours. Later, you remember. And with that memory comes something familiar. A quiet discomfort. Not panic. Not fear. Just that subtle feeling that says, I should have done this already. You replay the moment in your head. You wonder how it looks from the outside. And almost automatically, the guilt shows up. If this feels familiar, pause. Because this isn't about being careless. And it's not about not caring enough. In fact, people who care deeply often feel this more intensely. You've probably heard the comments before. Why do you take so long? It's just a message. You could at least say something. Sometimes it's said casually. Sometimes as a joke. Sometimes with irritation underneath. And each time, you feel that quiet pressure to explain yourself. Maybe you've laughed it off. Maybe you've apologized. Maybe you've trained yourself to reply faster than feels natural, just to avoid being misunderstood. And that's the part most people never see. The effort, the internal adjustment, the subtle tension of forcing your mind to move faster than its natural rhythm. But pause again, because what looks like delay on the outside often has nothing to do with avoidance on the inside. For some minds, replying isn't a quick tap. It's a transition, a shift, a movement from one internal state into another. Some people move between worlds easily. They can be focused, distracted, social, productive, all within seconds. They switch gears without even noticing it. Others need a moment. Some people respond fast. Others respond right. And if you're someone who pauses, your mind isn't stalling. It's recalibrating. When a message comes in, your brain doesn't just register words. It registers tone, subtext, timing. It senses what the message means, not just what it says. And meaning matters to you. Your mind shifts from whatever it was immersed in into a social space. And that shift costs energy. That's the invisible part. Because from the outside, it looks effortless. But internally, your brain is doing something very specific. It's adjusting attention, emotional posture, mental focus. It's asking quiet questions. What's the right tone here? How will this be received? What does this moment actually need? Those questions don't have instant answers. And your mind doesn't like guessing. So instead of reacting automatically, your system pauses. Not to avoid, not to disappear, but to align. This is why even simple messages can feel heavier than expected. Not because the reply is difficult, but because your mind doesn't like half presence. You don't want to reply while distracted. You don't want to respond on autopilot. You don't want to send words that don't feel accurate. So you wait. And that waiting isn't empty. It's active. Your mind is already working, running possibilities, testing tone, imagining outcomes. You might even rehearse the response in your head, rewrite it mentally, refine it, all before you ever type a single word. You're not ignoring the person. You're preparing the response. Have you noticed how this pause feels different depending on who you're replying to? Sometimes the pause doesn't even feel conscious. You don't actively decide to delay. You just don't move. And later you might ask yourself, why something so small felt like it required so much space? You might notice a pattern. You reply faster to people you feel safe with. Slower when the relationship feels unclear. Slower when the conversation carries emotional weight. Not because you're afraid, but because your mind is scanning. It's sensing nuance, reading between the lines, trying to understand what isn't being said. And here's the part that's rarely talked about. For minds like yours, responding isn't just communication. It's exposure. Once you reply, you're in the interaction. You've opened a channel. You've made yourself available. And availability costs energy. So the pause becomes a way to check in with yourself first. Do I have the capacity right now? Can I be present? Do I have enough space to engage honestly? Those questions might not be verbal. You might not even notice them. But your system does. And if the answer isn't clear yet, Your body waits. This is why forcing yourself to reply quickly often feels wrong. Not stressful exactly, just misaligned, like saying yes when something inside you hasn't finished checking the conditions. That pause isn't resistance. It's self-awareness. From the outside, this can look like distance, like hesitation, like silence. But on the inside, it's intention, it's care, it's consideration. And that same internal process shows up in other places too. Before speaking in a group, before posting something online, before making a decision that feels small to others, but significant to you. You pause, not because you're unsure, but because you're thorough. You don't answer quickly. You answer consciously. And that difference matters more than most people realize. Because quick responses often come from momentum, but conscious responses come from awareness. And awareness takes time. This is where the friction begins. Because we live in a world that rewards speed. Instant replies, instant reactions, instant availability. Fast is interpreted as engaged. Slow is interpreted as disinterest. Silence is often misunderstood as absence. But that rule was not written with every kind of mind in mind, because not every mind is built for constant switching. Some minds work best when they can finish one internal state before entering another. Some minds need closure before transition, and when those minds are forced into constant responsiveness, they don't become faster. They become tired. They start associating communication with pressure instead of connection. They begin to feel like every message is a demand instead of an invitation. So if replying sometimes feels like effort, that doesn't mean something is wrong with you. It means your mind treats interaction as something that deserves presence, not performance, not immediacy, presence. And presence is expensive. It requires energy, attention, emotional availability. So when you pause before replying, your system is protecting that resource. It's not shutting down. It's regulating. So if you need time before replying, you don't need to fix that. You don't need to force yourself to respond faster than feels natural. And you don't need to apologize for the way your mind transitions. Understanding it is enough. Because once you understand this about yourself, something begins to shift. The guilt softens. The self-criticism fades. The pause stops feeling like a flaw and starts feeling like information, like feedback from your own system. And when you stop fighting it, communication becomes lighter again, more intentional, more honest, more aligned. And if you've noticed that this same pause shows up in other areas of your life, before you post, before you speak, before you commit, that's not random either. That's the same internal mechanism, the same kind of mind, and that is another clue, one worth exploring.